welcome to Mind, Body and Spirit. I'm here talking to Lena Parelli, who is a pilot and a horsewoman, and she has amazing stories about her work in the military. And I asked her to talk about relationships and communication, because being a woman in a man's world or a military world, there's a lot of black and white that can happen, but that doesn't necessarily get you the outcomes that you want, right? So we talked about obedience versus real respect. So you told me a story as a platoon leader about was he a sergeant?
Section sergeant.
A section sergeant. So tell us the story. What happened?
Yeah, so as a woman in the military, it's challenging because you're constantly walking this line of having to be functioning in a male society where they expect a lot of aggression and they expect a lot of dominance, and they kind of do the behind the woodshed stuff where they'll get into a little tit for tat fight, and then they'll come out of it and everything will be fine, and that's not innate to a lot of women. We prefer conversation, we prefer more social interaction, and being able to be as effective with that nature.
And I know for me and a lot of women I've spoken to, they're afraid of being called a bitch. As soon as you're strong and forthright, you get the B word, which is very judgmental.
Yes.
Whereas a man could do that and it's expected, right?
Yes. So you've got to constantly be on the border of, you need to have authority in your position, but there's a lot of perception. So you have to have authority without being emotional. And so I had to practice that. I got the opportunity to practice that quite a bit in my horsemanship. But that led to the situation where I had my superior officers were asking me to hook up a generator to the aircraft and get it all wired into the system so that we could use those, because it's a very expensive equipment that was sitting out there. But when I asked my subordinates to go ahead and do that, they said, we can't do that. And so I told my superior officers, we can't do that. Well, then they asked me, why can't we do that? And I'm like, I don't know. So I wanted to make sure that the next time they asked me that I had a more clear picture and I could explain it effectively as to why we couldn't do it, and they would stop asking me to get it done. Originally I had gone to the section sergeant, who was the person responsible for the electrical section in my platoon. And so when I went back to get more information, he wasn't available. And so I went to his soldiers and I said, hey, can you explain to me why I can't do this? Because I'm being asked to do it and I can't communicate why I can't do it. So please run me through all the networks and the hardware and all that kind of stuff so that I can communicate that. And so they did tell me. Well, then, of course, a section sergeant comes back to work and he hears that I had been talking to his subordinates and he thought I was trying to get a yes when he had already said no, and that I was going around him.
Oh, boy.
So he's, of course, obviously very mad. And
you're his superior.
And I am his superior
officer. So now
officer.
he has to stand up to you.
Yes. So basically he felt that I was undermining him because I had gone around him to try to get a different answer, which, undermines his leadership in his section. And of course there's that female dynamic and all that kind of stuff. And so he comes into my office and he's very, very angry. And he is basically yelling at me. And standing in front of my desk and gesticulating and waving his arms.
Wow.
And this is not something that is supposed to happen in the military. It's a lot easier for it to happen to women because a lot of time women will diminish themselves and they will feel impeded upon, and so they kind of go, oh, okay, And because I'm used to having, a 2,000-pound draft horse run at me full speed, I was like sitting, at my desk, like, this is okay. But the other part of it is that there's a certain amount of legal respect that you're supposed to have for superior officers, even if it's just technical. Like, you're not supposed to yell the way that he was yelling. And so my platoon sergeant, who was my kind of enlisted counterpart, was also very angry watching this junior NCO kind of scream at me. So he was about to step in, and I kind of said, hold on, just let him finish. Because I recognized that I legitimately had done something that at the very least had been perceived as undermining him, even if I had not intentionally undermined him. And I had one of two options. The military answer generally is to look at him and say, you get out of my office until you have a little bit more respect for me, because we're not going to have this conversation. Which would have been the very male aggressive thing to do.
And that's the obedience
And
versus respect.
Exactly, because he would have done it. He legally would have had to obey me. But I also recognized in that moment, I was like, the next time I ask him to do something, I am going to get the minimum amount of effort, because I've damaged the relationship.
Right.
He's not going to respect me the same way.
Right.
Because I did something that he felt was undermining him, and then he came in to try to address it, even though he addressed it incorrectly. And then I just shut him down and got rid of him. So instead, I chose to kind of hear him out. And then, because I had all this practice of keeping calm and everything, I was like, okay, I offended him. This is how I offended him. It was unintentional, but that's the perception. So I waited for him to say his piece. And then I came back with, hey, I have the greatest amount of respect for you. And I apologize if what I did was perceived as undermining your leadership. I had no intention of doing that. So immediately I had set forth the relationship, and I had addressed why he came in and why he was upset. And then I said, well, this is what I was trying to do. This is why I did it in the timeline that I did it. However, I understand the perception, and so the next time we go about this, I will try to do it differently, or I'll make sure that you are informed, or that I give them a message to leave for you.
Quite taken aback.
Right, and so he kind of froze in place and stuttered a little bit. That's not the normal.
He was waiting for the get out.
Right, it's not the normal reaction that most military leaders have in that moment, to sit there very calmly while you have an emotional outburst and just go, okay, I'm sorry. And those interactions was what allowed me to become the leader that I was, but also recognized by my soldiers as the unicorn. I was designated as the unicorn.
That's what that is?
Yeah, that is what that is. And so I got things like this that people would order, and they would put things on my desk and things like that. And so that was kind of my unofficial moniker was the unicorn, because that ability to change the way I worked with people and relate to people, and building those relationships and seeing how valuable relationships were, even in the military, even where technically I could have told them to get out of my office and nobody would have had a problem with it. But in knowing what I know now and wanting to be very authentic in my leadership and who I was, and very comfortable in that at that point, was able to see something different. And so after that point, even though he was a very accomplished NCO and I had a lot of respect for him, he worked even harder after that point. And anytime I came down there, he's like, yes, ma'am, what can I do for you? How else can I help? And he was constantly coming to me with recommendations and ideas and
wow.
What else can we do? And those minor interactions changed the way that then he treated his subordinates, and that he treated the other section sergeants and the general community.
He appreciated it and then started, in a way, paying it forward. It was a great example. So what would you say is the difference? Like, how would you explain respect? You gave me this lovely little plaque,
yes.
With your team there, your platoon.
Mm-hmm. So these were the other soldiers that were on the aircraft with me. So that was the instructor pilot that we were with and the two crew chiefs.
And, when you gave this to me, you talked about the leadership and the teammanship that you got and the mutual respect.
Yes.
And so what would be your definition of respect? Like, how is that embodied in your team?
So there's a difference in the military between positional respect, right? And then genuine.
By rank, you mean?
Yeah, by rank, and then genuine respect. Like, there is you are my boss, I have to obey you. You are allocated based on your position a certain amount of respect. So they will say sir, they will say ma'am, they will do whatever they have to, and that is a given level of respect. And for the most part, that is where we operate at. You have to build relationships to get anything more than that. And for me, respect isn't positional. Respect is something that is earned. Like, my goal at the end of the deployment was to be claimed, right, basically by my platoon, where they would say, that is my platoon leader. That's my platoon leader. We are proud of her and what she does. And I want her to continue on and do good things. Whereas if someone were to come onto the airfield and they would say, where's your boss? And they'd be like, oh, the platoon leader is over there. Not my platoon leader.
Wow.
I mean, it's such a small thing, but the value of that is significantly different. And our retention of the soldiers that were in my platoon had increased significantly when we came back. There were a lot of guys that went over there that said, I'm so tired of this military thing, I don't want to do it anymore. And I had created an environment within my platoon where a lot of the soldiers that had said they were going to get out decided to re-enlist and stay.
Wow.
So they were like, hey, if this is how it can be, I don't mind. Even though we were in an incredibly austere environment, you know, it's 130 degrees and they're working on top of aircraft and they're away from home. They were still like, hey, you know what, this was worth it, you know, because I know that I'm valued. And that is what I feel like a respectful relationship is that both parties feel valued and that value helps them respect each other.
I love that. More with Lena in our next interview because I have another question about being a woman in a man's world. Stay tuned.